My name is Jessica. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago I was standing on the deck of the Royal Princess cruise ship, watching the Miami coastline fade into the distance. The Caribbean breeze felt like freedom against my skin. But what I didn't know was that I was sailing straight into the storm of my life. In my hand was a champagne flute that would soon be empty, and in my heart was an excitement that would soon be shattered by words that cut deeper than any hurricane wind. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. David had surprised me with this 7-day Caribbean cruise for our 3rd wedding anniversary. When he handed me the tickets that morning in our Phoenix apartment, his eyes sparkled with that boyish excitement I fell in love with 5 years ago when we were just coworkers sharing coffee breaks and stolen glances across conference room tables. This was supposed to be our celebration, our romantic getaway, just the two of us reconnecting after months of demanding work schedules and the everyday routine that can slowly drain the magic from any marriage. What David hadn't told me was that his entire family would be joining us. The morning we left Phoenix, I was humming while folding my favorite sundresses into our shared suitcase. David was in the shower, and I could hear him singing off-key, which always made me smile. I had packed the turquoise dress he complimented on our first date, the white one I wore to our engagement party, and the navy blue one that made me feel confident during important work presentations. Each dress held a memory, and I was excited to create new ones. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Rachel. Have the most amazing time. Take lots of pictures and don't let David hog all the good food at the buffet. I laughed and typed back a quick response, completely unaware that by the end of this trip, I would be questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my place in David's world. The flight from Phoenix to Miami was smooth. David held my hand during takeoff, a habit he'd developed after learning I get nervous when planes leave the ground. It's one of those small gestures that made me believe we were building something real together, something that could weather any storm. He showed me pictures of our cruise itinerary on his phone, pointing out the snorkeling excursion in Cozumel and the zip-lining adventure in Jamaica. His enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself leaning into his shoulder, already dreaming about the photos we'd take and the stories we'd tell when we got home. When we boarded the ship in Miami, I was overwhelmed by the sheer size of it. 15 decks, multiple restaurants, theaters, pools, and enough activities to keep us busy for weeks. Our balcony cabin was on deck 8, with a perfect view of the ocean that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. David lifted me up and spun me around right there on our private balcony, both of us laughing like teenagers. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of salt air and the sound of seagulls, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. We had about an hour to settle in before the mandatory safety drill, so we unpacked our clothes and took selfies against the ocean backdrop. David kept pulling me close and kissing my temple, whispering things like, 3 years down, forever, to go, and I can't wait to see you in that bikini tomorrow. The intimacy felt natural and easy, the way it always had between us, even during our most stressful periods. The first sign that something was different came during the safety drill. We were gathered on deck with our bulky orange life jackets, listening to crew members explain emergency procedures, when I heard a familiar voice behind us. "David, sweetheart, there you are." I turned to see Patricia Miller, my mother-in-law, approaching with her arms outstretched and that practiced smile she reserved for public displays of affection. My stomach dropped. David's face lit up in a way that made me realize he wasn't surprised to see her. "Mom, perfect timing," he said, embracing her warmly. Behind Patricia came Robert, David's father, looking distinguished in his pressed khaki, shorts and polo shirt. Then Caroline, David's younger sister, appeared with her husband Greg, both of them dressed like they were heading to a country club rather than a casual cruise safety drill. "Surprise!" Patricia exclaimed, though her eyes were fixed on David, not me. When David told us about the cruise, we just couldn't resist booking the same one. What are the odds?" She laughed in that high-pitched way that always made my teeth ache. I looked at David, searching his face for some explanation, some sign that he was as shocked as I was. But all I saw was sheepish guilt. "You knew," I said. Quietly, the words barely audible over the announcement about lifeboat locations. David's hand found mine, squeezing gently. "Jess, I can explain. They really wanted to celebrate with us, and I thought it might be nice to have family around for our anniversary." His voice carried that pleading tone he used when he knew he'd made a mistake, but hoped I'd forgive him anyway. Caroline stepped forward, her perfectly manicured nails catching the afternoon sunlight. "Jessica, you look surprised. Didn't David tell you we were coming?" Her tone was innocent enough, but there was something underneath it, a subtle sharpness that made me feel like I was missing some crucial piece of information. I forced a smile, the kind I'd perfected during 3 years of family gatherings where I often felt like an outsider looking in. "No, he didn't mention it, but it's wonderful that you're all here." The lies came easily now, a survival skill I'd developed without realizing it. Patricia linked her arm through David's, effectively positioning herself between us. "We have so much planned." Robert made reservations at the specialty restaurants for every night, and Caroline found the most darling couple spa package. "Won't that be fun?" She was speaking to David as if I wasn't standing right there, as if the anniversary being celebrated belonged to him alone. The safety drill ended, and we all made our way toward the elevators. I noticed that David's family had booked cabins on the same deck as ours just a few doors down. When I asked David about it later, he said it was just a coincidence, but the way he avoided eye contact told me otherwise. That first evening, we were all scheduled to meet for dinner at the main dining room. I had chosen the turquoise dress, hoping to recapture some of the romantic mood David and I had shared in our cabin earlier. I spent extra time on my makeup, wanting to look my best, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I was preparing for battle rather than celebration. David was adjusting his tie when I emerged from the bathroom. "You look beautiful," he said, but his eyes were already moving toward his phone, checking the time. "We should head down. Mom made the reservation for 7:30 sharp." The dining room was elegant, with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and soft jazz playing in the background. David's family was already seated at a large round table when we arrived. Patricia had somehow positioned herself at what felt like the head of the table, with Robert to her right and an empty chair to her left, clearly intended for David. This left me to sit between Caroline and Greg, feeling like an afterthought in my own anniversary celebration. The conversation started pleasantly enough. Patricia talked about their flight from Denver. Robert shared details about some recent golf tournament he'd participated in, and Caroline showed everyone photos from her latest interior design project. I tried to contribute when I could, mentioning some of the marketing campaigns I'd been working on, but my comments seemed to fall into a void, acknowledged with polite nods before the conversation quickly moved on to topics that didn't include me. It was during the main course that things took a darker turn. Patricia was cutting into her filet mignon when she looked up at David with that maternal expression that always made me feel invisible. "Darling, Caroline and I were just talking about how different your life has become since the wedding. Remember how spontaneous you used to be? All those adventure trips you'd take, the way you'd change your plans at a moment's notice?" David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I'm still spontaneous, Mom. This cruise was spontaneous." "Oh, but was it really?" Caroline chimed in, twirling her pasta with deliberate precision. "I mean, Jessica probably had to approve it first, right? Check if it fit into her work schedule?" She glanced at me with what might have been a smile but felt more like a challenge. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Actually, David surprised me with this trip. I had no idea until this morning. "How sweet," Patricia said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but sweet. David always was thoughtful about including others in his plans. Even back in college, he'd make sure everyone felt welcome at his parties. He's always been a people pleaser. There was something in the way she emphasized people pleaser that made it sound like a weakness rather than a virtue. Robert, who had been quietly eating his salmon, looked up with a slight frown. David's always known his own mind, Patricia. Let's not make it sound like he's easily influenced. But Patricia wasn't finished. Oh, Robert, you know what I mean. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Our David has such a kind heart. Sometimes I worry that people might take advantage of that kindness, especially when there are significant differences in background and expectations. The table fell silent except for the gentle clinking of silverware against china. I felt every eye on me, and suddenly my turquoise dress felt too bright, too attention-seeking. David's hand found mine under the table, but his grip felt uncertain, as if he wasn't sure whether he was offering comfort or asking for it. "What exactly do you mean by that, Mrs. Miller?" I heard myself asking, my voice steadier than I felt. Patricia dabbed at her lips with her napkin, taking her time before responding. "Oh, nothing specific, dear. It's just that when people come from very different worlds, sometimes motivations can be misunderstood. David was always such a catch, you know. Even in high school, girls were throwing themselves at him." Caroline laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Remember that girl from his senior year? What was her name? Madison? She followed him around like a lost puppy until Mom had to have a talk with her parents." "That's enough," David said quietly, but his protest lacked force. He was looking down at his plate, not at me, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he wasn't going to defend me the way I'd hoped he would. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and barely concealed tension. When we finally returned to our cabin, I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process what had just happened. David was hanging up his jacket, moving, with the careful precision of someone who knows they're in trouble but isn't sure how deep. "Jess?" he started, but I held up my hand. "Did you know they were going to say those things?" "Of course not. You know my mom sometimes speaks without thinking." "Without thinking, or without caring how it affects me?" David sat beside me, on the bed, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same scent I'd loved since our first kiss. "She's just protective. She doesn't know you the way I do." "David, we've been together for 5 years, married for 3. How much more? Time does she need?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean through our balcony doors. The moonlight created a silver path across the water, beautiful and unreachable. "Maybe this cruise will help. Maybe spending time together in a relaxed setting will change things." I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the woman who had just implied I was a gold digger at our anniversary dinner would somehow transform into someone who could accept me as David's wife. But deep in my chest, I felt a cold certainty that this cruise was going to test our marriage in ways neither of us was prepared for. That night, I lay awake listening to the gentle rocking of the ship and the sound of David's even breathing beside me. Through the thin walls, I could hear muffled voices from the direction of his family's cabins, too quiet to make out words but loud enough to know they were still talking. About what? I could only imagine, but I had a sinking feeling that I was the main topic of conversation. The next morning brought brilliant sunshine and the promise of our first port day in Cozumel. I had been looking forward to the snorkeling excursion David had booked for us, imagining it would be our chance to escape his family's constant presence and reconnect as a couple. I put on my new bikini, the red one I'd bought specifically for this trip, and felt a surge of confidence as David's eyes lit up when he saw me. "Wow," he said, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You're going to be the most beautiful woman on that boat." For a moment, it felt like we were back to being just us. the couple who had fallen in love over shared lunches and late-night conversations about our dreams. But then came the inevitable knock on our cabin door, and Patricia's voice calling, "David, honey, are you two ready? We don't want to miss the tender boat." That's when I learned that David's snorkeling excursion for two had somehow become a family adventure for six. Caroline appeared in a designer cover-up that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, while Patricia wore a wide-brimmed hat that looked like it belonged on a movie star from the 1950s. Even Greg, who I'd never seen so much as swim in a pool, was sporting brand-new snorkeling gear that still had the price tags attached. "Isn't this exciting?" Patricia gushed as we made our way to the tender boat that would take us to shore. "A whole family adventure. David, remember when we used to take you snorkeling in the Bahamas when you were little? You were such a natural in the water." As we found seats on the tender, Caroline positioned herself next to David while I ended, up squeezed between Robert and a stranger who smelled strongly of sunscreen and disappointment. I watched my husband laugh at his sister's jokes and listen attentively to his mother's stream of commentary about the scenery, and I felt like I was disappearing a little more with each passing minute. The snorkeling itself was beautiful. The coral reefs around Cozumel were more vibrant than any photograph could capture, teeming with tropical fish in every color imaginable. For brief moments underwater, surrounded by silence and wonder, I forgot about the tension and just marveled at the incredible world beneath the surface. But even there, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched and judged. When we surfaced for a break, Caroline swam over to where I was floating near the boat. "You're not much of a swimmer, are you?" she said, water droplets catching the sunlight as she treaded water with the effortless grace of someone who had grown up with a pool in their backyard. "I'm fine," I replied, though I was admittedly more tired than I wanted to admit. David's always been like a fish in water. Mom enrolled him in swim lessons when he was 4, and by 8 he was winning races at the country club. It's hard to keep up with him when you didn't grow up around water, I imagine. There it was again, that subtle reminder that I didn't belong, that I hadn't been raised with the same privileges and opportunities that had shaped David's world. I treaded water and smiled, but inside I was drowning in the realization that this wasn't just about a family vacation anymore. This was about my place in David's life, and whether that place was secure enough to survive a week of constant undermining. As we swam back to the boat, I caught sight of David floating on his back, his face turned toward the sun, looking completely at peace. He belonged here, in this world of spontaneous family trips and casual luxury, in a way that I was beginning to understand I never would. The question was whether he would choose that world or choose me. That evening back on the ship, I stood in our cabin's shower, letting the hot water wash away the salt from my skin, but it couldn't wash away the growing knot in my stomach. Through the bathroom door, I could hear David on the phone with room service, ordering a bottle of wine for us to share on the balcony. His voice sounded cheerful, optimistic, like he genuinely believed we could salvage our romantic anniversary despite his family's constant presence. When I emerged from the bathroom wrapped in one of the ship's plush robes, David was arranging cheese and fruit on our small balcony table. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine this was how our entire cruise was supposed to be. Just us, the ocean, and the kind of intimate conversations that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. "Come here," David said, pulling me close as we stood at the balcony railing. "I'm sorry about today. I know the snorkeling wasn't exactly what we planned." I leaned into his warmth, breathing in his familiar scent. "It's not just today, David. It's the way your mother looks at me, the things Caroline says. Do you even notice it?" He was quiet for a long moment, his arms tightening around me. "I think you might be reading too much into things. They take time to warm up to new people." "New people? David, we've been married for 3 years. Your mother still introduces me as David's wife, Jessica, instead of just Jessica. Like my name doesn't matter unless it's attached to yours. That's just her way. She means well. I turned in his arms to face him, searching his eyes for understanding. What if I told you that your way of showing love was making me feel invisible? Would you want to know about it? Or would you tell me I was reading too much into things? David's face softened, and for a moment I thought I was getting through to him. Jess, you're not invisible to me. You're everything to me. But am I everything to your family? Because sometimes it feels like they're waiting for you to wake up and realize you made a mistake. Before David could respond, we heard voices from the neighboring balcony. Caroline's laugh carried clearly across the narrow gap between cabins, followed by Patricia's voice saying, "Well, she certainly doesn't seem comfortable in the water. Good thing David's such a strong swimmer, in case she ever gets in over her head." More laughter, and then Greg's voice. "Maybe she just needs more practice. Some people aren't naturally athletic." "It's not about athletics," Patricia's voice came again, clearer now. "It's about confidence. David needs someone who can keep up with him, who won't hold him back from the adventures he loves." I felt David stiffen beside me. He'd heard it, too. This wasn't an accident, wasn't bad timing. They were talking loudly enough for us to hear, and they wanted us to hear it. "Maybe we should go inside," David said quietly, but I shook my head. "No. I want to hear what else they have to say about me." Caroline's voice drifted over again. "Remember that time in college when David brought home, what's her name, the pre-med student?" "Mom, you said she was perfect for him." "Stephanie," Patricia replied. "Such a lovely girl. From a good family, shared David's interests, could hold her own in any conversation. I always wondered what happened there." "She was too independent." Robert's voice joined the conversation. "Didn't need David enough. Sometimes men need to feel needed." "True," Patricia agreed. "But there's a difference between being needed and being needy. David's always been attracted to people who depend on him, but dependency isn't the same as compatibility." I gripped the balcony railing so hard my knuckles went white. David's hand found mine, but I pulled away. These weren't casual observations. They were calculated strikes designed to plant seeds of doubt in both our minds. "That's enough," David said, raising his voice slightly. "We can hear you." The voices stopped abruptly, followed by Patricia's artificially bright tone. "Oh, David. We didn't realize you were out there. We were just enjoying the sunset." "I'm sure you were," David replied, but his voice lacked conviction. That night, dinner was at the ship's specialty steakhouse, another reservation Robert had made for the entire family. I chose my navy blue dress, the one that made me feel professional and confident, armor for whatever new assault awaited. David complimented how I looked, but his smile seemed forced, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The restaurant was dimly lit with elegant wood paneling and leather banquettes. Our table was positioned near a window with a spectacular ocean view, but I found myself focusing more on the family dynamics playing out around the table than the scenery outside. Patricia had dressed for the occasion in a cream-colored cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She commanded attention effortlessly, the way some people are born knowing how to work a room. Caroline sat beside her in a black dress that looked like it belonged on a red carpet, while I felt overdressed and underdressed at the same time. The conversation started with safe topics: the ship's amenities, tomorrow's stop in Jamaica, the weather forecast. I contributed where I could, sharing details about the marketing conference I'd attended in Jamaica 2 years ago for work. For a moment, I thought I'd found my footing. "Oh, how interesting," Patricia said when I finished describing the resort where the conference had been held. "David, didn't you and Stephanie vacation in Jamaica during your senior year? Where was it you stayed?" David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Mom, that was a long time ago." The Ritz-Carlton in Montego Bay, Caroline supplied helpfully. I remember because you sent us those gorgeous photos from the beach club. Stephanie looked like a model in that white bikini. The conversation shifted seamlessly to David's college adventures, with Patricia and Caroline sharing memory after memory of trips, parties, and experiences that painted a picture of a life filled with privilege and possibility. I noticed how often Stephanie's name came up, how she was woven into nearly every story like the ghost of relationships past. Stephanie was always so game for anything, Patricia continued, cutting into her lobster tail with surgical precision. Skydiving, rock climbing, those extreme sports David loves. I remember thinking they were perfect adventure partners. Why did you two break up? Greg asked, seemingly oblivious to the tension his question created. David shifted uncomfortably. We just grew apart. Wanted different things. That's right, Caroline said, as if suddenly remembering. She got into Harvard Medical School, didn't she? Such an accomplished girl. Is she still practicing in Boston? I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. This feels like a strange topic for our anniversary dinner. Patricia looked at me with what might have been surprise, as if she'd forgotten I was there. Oh, sweetheart. We're not dwelling on the past. We're just reminiscing. David has such wonderful memories from his college years. Don't you want to know about the experiences that shaped him? I know about David's past. We've been together for 5 years. Of course you do. Patricia's voice carried a note of condescension that made my teeth ache. But there's knowing facts and understanding context. David's always been someone who throws himself completely into relationships. Sometimes I worry he doesn't take enough time to think about long-term compatibility. Robert cleared his throat. Patricia, perhaps we should focus on the present. But Patricia was on a roll. I'm just saying that David's generous heart sometimes leads him to make commitments before he's fully considered all the implications. Remember when he wanted to buy that motorcycle in college? Or when he was going to drop out and become a wilderness guide? I never seriously considered dropping out, David protested. You talked about it for months, Caroline said, until Stephanie pointed out how impractical it would be. She had such a good head for long-term planning. I set down my wine glass, more forcefully than I intended. Are we really going to spend our entire anniversary dinner talking about David's ex-girlfriend? The table fell silent. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, as if I'd committed some terrible breach of etiquette. Caroline exchanged a look with her mother that I couldn't quite interpret, but it felt loaded with meaning. Jessica, Patricia said, her voice taking on a tone I'd heard her use with difficult waitstaff. We're just family having a conversation. There's no need to be defensive. I'm not being defensive. I'm being realistic. This is supposed to be a celebration of David's and my marriage, but instead we're reminiscing about his relationship with someone else. David reached for my hand under the table. Jess, it's okay. They didn't mean anything by it. That's when Caroline leaned forward, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Jessica, can I ask you something? When you and David first started dating, did you know about his family's financial situation? The question hit like a physical blow. Around the table, I could feel everyone holding their breath, waiting for my response. Even the sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the thundering of my own heartbeat. I'm sorry. What? I'm just curious about your perspective, Caroline continued, twirling her engagement ring around her finger. David's always been modest about money, but I imagine it was obvious pretty quickly that he comes from a comfortable background. Did that factor into your feelings for him? Caroline, David's voice carried a warning. What? I'm just asking. It's natural to be curious about someone's motivations, especially when there are such obvious differences in background. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. What exactly are you implying? Patricia jumped in, her voice silky smooth. Oh, sweetheart, Caroline isn't implying anything. It's just that sometimes when people from different worlds come together, outsiders might wonder about the dynamics. You have to admit, from the outside looking in, it might seem like quite a coincidence that a marketing coordinator from a working-class family would end up with someone like David. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I couldn't escape. Around us, other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the fact that my marriage was being dissected and questioned at a table 20 feet away. Are you suggesting I married David for his money? Of course not, Patricia said, but her tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply observing that David has always been generous to a fault. He sees the best in people, sometimes when others might be more cautious. Robert cleared his throat again, louder this time. I think that's enough. But Caroline wasn't finished. It's just that David was so different after he met you. More serious, less spontaneous. He stopped doing the things he loved, stopped taking risks. It was like watching someone slowly disappear into someone else's vision of who they should be. I looked at David, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his family that I had never tried to change him, that I loved his adventurous spirit and had always encouraged his dreams. But he was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched, saying nothing. David, I said quietly, are you going to say something? He looked up then, his eyes meeting mine across the table. In them, I saw conflict, uncertainty, and something that looked almost like guilt. This isn't the time or place for this conversation. When is the time? When is the place? Because your family seems to think this is the perfect opportunity to question my motivations and our entire relationship. Patricia dabbed at her lips with her napkin. Jessica, dear, no one is questioning your relationship. We're just concerned family members who want what's best for David. And what's best for David doesn't include me? We never said that, Caroline protested, but her smirk suggested otherwise. I pushed back from the table, my hands shaking. I need some air. David started to rise. Jess, wait. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Stay. Enjoy dinner. With your family. Reminisce about Stephanie some more. I'm sure she would have handled this conversation much better than I am. I walked out of the restaurant on unsteady legs, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall until I was safely alone. Behind me, I could hear David calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't face him right now, couldn't look into his eyes and see doubt where there should have been certainty. The ship's deck was nearly empty, most passengers having gone to dinner or evening shows. I found a quiet spot near the stern and gripped the railing, letting the ocean wind cool my burning cheeks. The wake stretched out behind us, white foam disappearing into darkness, and I felt like I was watching my marriage dissolve in the same way. Footsteps approached, and I turned expecting to see David. Instead, it was Robert, David's father, looking uncomfortable but determined. Jessica, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. You don't need to apologize for them. Yes, I do. He moved to stand beside me at the railing, his hands clasped behind his back. What happened in there was wrong. Patricia and Caroline. They're protective of David, but tonight they crossed a line. They think I trapped him. Robert was quiet for a long moment. I think they're afraid. Of me? Of losing him. David's always been the golden child, you know. The one who could do no wrong, who made all of us look good by association. When he fell in love with you, really fell in love, they realized he might choose you over them if it came down to it. It shouldn't have to come down to that. No, it shouldn't. But Patricia has never been good at sharing David's attention, and Caroline has always competed with anyone who might take her place as the most important woman in his life after his mother. We stood in silence for a while, watching the stars, reflect on the water. Finally, Robert spoke again. For what it's worth, I think David chose well. You're good for him in ways they refuse to see. Then why won't he defend me? Robert sighed. Because he's still learning how to be a husband instead of just a son. Give him time. When I finally returned to our cabin, David was sitting on the balcony, still in his dinner clothes. He looked up when I entered, relief flooding his face. I was worried about you. Were you? Or were you too busy discussing my gold-digging tendencies with your family? David flinched. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, David? Because from where I was sitting, it seemed like your family was putting me on trial, and you were content to let them be the jury. He stood and moved toward me, but I stepped back. Jess, you know how much I love you. Do I? Because love isn't just words, David. It's actions. It's standing up for the person you claim to love when they're being attacked. They weren't attacking you. Then what would you call it? Because suggesting I married you for money, questioning my motivations, comparing me to your ex-girlfriend, and implying I've somehow diminished your life sounds a lot like an attack to me. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing, but now just seemed like frustration. They're having trouble adjusting. It's been 3 years, David. How much more adjustment time do they need? Maybe if you tried to understand their perspective. The words hit me like ice water. Their perspective? Their perspective is that I'm not good enough for you, that I somehow tricked you into marriage, and that you'd be better off with someone else. What exactly am I supposed to understand about that? They're not wrong about everything. I have changed since we got together. The admission hung between us like a blade. I felt something inside my chest crack, not break completely, but develop a fissure that I knew would never fully heal. Changed how? I used to be more spontaneous. I took more risks, traveled more, tried new things. With you, I've become more cautious, more focused on stability. And that's bad? No, it's not bad. It's just different. And sometimes I wonder if I've given up parts of myself to make our relationship work. I sat down heavily on the bed, suddenly exhausted. So your family is right. I am holding you back. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. I looked up at him, this man I'd loved for 5 years, married for 3, and wondered when we'd started speaking different languages. David, do you want to be married to me? Of course I do. That's not what I asked. I asked if you want to be married to me. Not if you love me, not if you're committed to me, not if you think divorce would be too complicated. Do you want to be my husband? He was quiet for so long that I had my answer before he spoke. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. The words, I don't know, echoed in the silence of our cabin like a death knell. I stared at David, waiting for him to take it back, to explain that he'd misspoken, that of course he wanted to be married to me. But he just stood there, looking as shocked by his own honesty as I was devastated by it. I rose from the bed slowly, feeling like I was moving underwater. Everything seemed distant and muffled, including my own voice when I finally spoke. Thank you for being honest. Jess, wait, that came out wrong. Did it? Because it sounded pretty clear to me. I moved to the closet and pulled out my suitcase, the same one I'd packed with such excitement just 2 days ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. What are you doing? I'm giving you what you want, space to figure out who you are without me holding you back. I began folding clothes with mechanical precision, each movement helping me stay focused on the task instead of the pain threatening to overwhelm me. David grabbed my wrist gently. You can't leave. We're in the middle of the ocean. I can move to a different cabin. The guest services desk is open 24 hours. I pulled away from his touch, not because I was angry, but because his hands on my skin made it harder to think clearly. Jess, please, let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? I turned to face him, and he stepped back at whatever he saw in my expression. David, your family spent the entire evening questioning my motives for marrying you. And when I looked to you for support, you told them they weren't entirely wrong. What's rational about that? I never said they were right about your motives. No, you just said I'd changed you, made you more cautious, less adventurous. You basically confirmed their worst fears about me. I resumed packing, grateful to have something to do with my hands. And then when I asked if you wanted to be married to me, you said you didn't know. So really, the only rational thing left is for me to give you the space to figure it out. David sank into the chair by the window, his head in his hands. This isn't how our anniversary was supposed to go. No, it wasn't. It was supposed to be about us celebrating our marriage, not questioning whether it should exist in the first place. I zipped up my suitcase and set it by the door. I'm going to see about getting another room. At least wait until morning, please. I looked at him sitting there, looking lost and confused, and for a moment my resolve wavered. This was still the man I'd fallen in love with, still the person who'd held me through my father's funeral, who'd celebrated with me when I got my promotion, who'd promised to love me for better or worse. But I was learning that promises made in wedding venues felt different when tested by family pressure and honest doubt. I'll sleep on the couch, I said finally. But tomorrow I'm moving to my own room. That night I lay on the small sofa, listening to David toss and turn in the bed we should have been sharing. Every few minutes I heard him shift, clear his throat, or sigh deeply, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I pretended to sleep, but my mind was racing with fragments of the evening's conversations and the devastating realization that the man I'd married might not actually want to be married to me. When morning came, I was already awake, staring out at the Jamaica coastline growing larger on the horizon. David emerged from the bedroom looking haggard, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Good morning," he said cautiously. "Morning." I was already dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, ready to disembark for our day in Ocho Rios. "Are you still planning to get your own room?" "Yes." David nodded, accepting this with a resignation that somehow hurt more than if he'd fought me on. Are you still coming on the excursion today?" I'd almost forgotten about the zip-lining adventure he'd booked, the one he'd been so excited about when he first showed me the cruise itinerary. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Because of yesterday?" "Because I need time to think. And I can't do that with your family watching my every move, waiting for me to prove their point about not being adventurous enough." David's face fell. "They're not like that." "Aren't they?" Caroline specifically mentioned how Stephanie was always game for extreme sports. "Last night, your mother talked about how I seemed uncomfortable in the water. They're building a case, David, and you're helping them. That's not fair." "Neither is having my marriage dissected over dinner." I picked up my purse and headed for the door. "I'm going to explore the island on my own today. We can talk tonight." The guest services desk was busy with passengers, arranging shore excursions and dinner reservations, but the representative was helpful when I explained I needed to change rooms. She didn't ask questions, just typed efficiently on her computer and handed me a new keycard. "Deck 12, cabin 1207, she said with a professional smile. "Would you like assistance moving your belongings?" "Thank you, but I can manage." My new cabin was smaller than the one I'd shared with David, with an interior view instead of a balcony, but it was mine. I sat on the narrow bed and tried to process how my marriage had unraveled so completely in less than 48. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How's the romantic cruise going? Hopefully David is spoiling you rotten." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "It's complicated. I'll call you when I get home." Her response came immediately. "Uh-oh. What happened?" Do I need to fly to the Caribbean and kick someone's ass? Despite everything, I smiled. Rachel had been my best friend since college, and she'd never liked David's family. She'd been too polite to say much, but I'd caught her rolling her eyes during their speeches at our wedding reception. Just family drama. I'm okay. You better call me the minute you're back on dry land. Love you. Love you too. I spent the day exploring Ocho Rios alone, wandering through craft markets and along the beach, trying to clear my head. Other cruise passengers moved in groups, families and couples enjoying their vacation, and I felt conspicuous in my solitude. Several times I caught myself reaching for my phone to text David about something interesting I'd seen, only to remember that we weren't sharing experiences anymore. Around noon, I found a quiet beachside restaurant and ordered lunch, grateful for the chance to sit and think without interruption. The server, a friendly woman about my age, brought me a plate of jerk chicken and rice and beans. "You here alone, honey?" she asked with genuine concern. "Just taking some time to myself," I said. "Ah," she nodded knowingly. "Sometimes that's exactly what we need. You enjoy that meal, and if you need anything else, you just holler." As I ate, I thought about David's confession that he'd changed since we'd been together. Was that really such a terrible thing? People were supposed to grow and evolve in relationships. When I'd met David, I'd been more impulsive myself, quicker, to take risks both personally and professionally. Being with him had taught me the value of planning, of considering consequences, of building something stable and lasting. But apparently his family saw my influence as limiting rather than grounding. They wanted the David who would drop everything for a weekend adventure, who made decisions based on excitement rather than practicality. They wanted the David who had been with Stephanie, someone who matched his energy and background, someone who enhanced rather than, in their view, constrained him. The question I kept circling back to was whether David agreed with them. His admission that he didn't know if he wanted to be married to me suggested that some part of him did. But which part? The part that genuinely questioned our compatibility, or the part that was worn down by years of family pressure and subtle suggestions that he'd settled for less than he deserved? My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hello?" "Hey." His voice sounded distant, and I could hear wind and voices in the background. "How's your day going?" "It's fine. How was ziplining?" "Good. Different. Without you there." He paused. "Mom keeps asking where you are." "What did you tell her?" "That you weren't feeling well." Of course he'd lied rather than admit we were having problems. Patricia would probably take that as confirmation that I was too weak for adventure sports anyway. "David, we need to talk when you get back to the ship." "I know. There's something I need to tell you." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Not over." The phone. "Can we meet in your new room when we get back?" "Okay." "Jess?" "Yeah?" "I love you. Whatever else is happening, I need you to know that." I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. "I love you too." But as I hung up, I realized that love might not be enough. David loved me, but he didn't know if he wanted to be married to me. I loved him, but I was beginning to question whether I wanted to be married to someone who couldn't defend our relationship when it mattered most. The afternoon passed slowly. I returned to the ship early and sat in my new cabin, dreading whatever David needed to tell me. Part of me wondered if he'd decided to ask for a divorce, if the family pressure and his own doubts had finally convinced him to cut his losses. Another part of me hoped he'd realized how wrong his family had been and was coming to apologize and fight for us. A knock on my door came around 5 o'clock. I opened it to find David standing in the hallway, still in his adventure gear, looking nervous and determined. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside to let him enter. The small cabin felt even smaller, with both of us in it, and I was acutely aware of how different this conversation would be from all the intimate talks we'd had on our balcony just 2 days ago. "How was your day?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Peaceful. Gave me time to think. Me too. David looked down at his hands. I need to tell you about the conversation I had with my family today. My heart started racing. Okay. After you left this morning, Mom cornered me at breakfast. She said she was worried about us, about our marriage. I'm sure she was. She thinks we got married too quickly, that we didn't take enough time to really understand our differences. I felt that familiar anger rising. And what do you think? I think she's been watching us for 3 years, waiting for cracks to appear. David looked up at me then, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. I think she's been creating those cracks. I sat down in the room's single chair, afraid my legs might give out. What do you mean? I mean the constant comparisons to Stephanie, the subtle digs about your background, the way she always manages to exclude you from family conversations. I think she's been trying to drive a wedge between us, and I've been too blind or too cowardly to see it. David, let me finish, please. He took a deep breath. Today, during the ziplining, Caroline made another comment about how Stephanie would have loved the adrenaline rush. And Mom started talking about how important it is for couples to share the same interests. And I realized I was tired of hearing about Stephanie. I remained silent, afraid to interrupt this train of thought. So I told them that. You did? I told them I was tired of hearing about my ex-girlfriend, tired of the comparisons, and tired of the implication that I'd made a mistake by marrying you. David's voice grew stronger. I told them that you're my wife, that I chose you, and that their constant undermining of our relationship was inappropriate and hurtful. I felt a flicker of hope. How did they react? About as well as you'd expect. Mom got defensive and said she was only looking out for my happiness. Caroline accused me of being brainwashed. Dad told them both to back off. And then what? David stood and began pacing the small space. And then Mom played her trump card. She said that if I was truly happy in my marriage, I wouldn't be so defensive about it. She said that deep down, I knew they were right about our incompatibility, and that's why their comments bothered me so much. The hope I'd been feeling started to fade. And what did you say to that? Nothing. Because part of me wondered if she was right. We sat in silence for a moment, the ship's engines humming beneath us as we sailed toward tomorrow's port in Grand Cayman. Is that what you came here to tell me? I asked finally. That your mother convinced you she's right? No. David stopped pacing and looked directly at me. I came to tell you that I spent the rest of the day thinking about what she said, really examining our relationship and my feelings about it. And I realized that the changes I've experienced since being with you aren't limitations, they're growth. The stability I've found isn't boring, it's grounding. The thoughtfulness you've brought to my decision-making isn't constraint, it's wisdom. I felt tears starting to form. David. I also realized that when I said I didn't know if I wanted to be married to you, what I really meant was that I didn't know if I was strong enough to be the husband you deserve. Someone who puts our marriage first, who stands up to his family when they're wrong, who chooses you every single day regardless of outside pressure. And now? David knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. Now I know that I want to learn how to be that person. I want to be the husband who defends you, supports you, and never makes you question whether you're enough. I looked into his eyes, searching for certainty, for the conviction that would convince me this wasn't just another moment of doubt that would fade the next time his family applied pressure. What happens tomorrow when your mother makes another comment? Or next month when Caroline sends you another photo of Stephanie's latest accomplishment? What happens when the pressure builds again? Then I remember this conversation. I remember how it felt to almost lose you, and I choose you anyway. I wanted to believe him. Every fiber of my being wanted to accept his words and fall back into his arms and pretend the last 2 days had been a terrible nightmare. but something held me back. David, I need more than words. I need to know that you're prepared to set boundaries with your family, to make it clear that undermining our marriage is unacceptable. What do you want me to do? I want you to have a real conversation with them, not just telling them to back off, but actually addressing the pattern of behavior and making it clear that it stops now. David nodded slowly. And if they don't accept that? Then you'll have to decide what matters more, their approval or our marriage. That's not a fair choice. It's the choice they're forcing you to make, David. It's the choice they've been forcing you to make for 3 years. I'm just finally asking you to make it consciously instead of letting them chip away at us piece by piece. David was quiet for a long time, and I could see him wrestling with the implications of what I was asking. Finally, he spoke. There's something else. Something I need to show you. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila envelope. I had this with me when we boarded the ship. I was planning to give it to you on our last night. I took the envelope with trembling fingers. What is it? Open it. Inside were official-looking documents, and as I read the heading, my breath caught in my throat. Vow renewal papers? I had them drawn up before we left. I wanted to surprise you with a ceremony on the ship, just the two of us, renewing our vows and making new promises. David's voice was soft with regret. I wanted to show you how committed I am to our marriage, how excited I am about our future, together. I stared at the papers, seeing our names typed in official font, the legal language that would have allowed us to reaffirm our commitment in the ship's chapel. You planned this before we came? Before I knew my family would be here, before all the drama started. I just wanted to celebrate us, to make this anniversary special. And now? Now I'm hoping it's not too late. I'm hoping you'll still consider it after I have that conversation with my family. I set the papers aside and looked at this man I'd married, this person I'd built a life with, who was offering me everything I'd wanted but only after I'd almost lost hope of ever receiving it. David, I want our marriage to work. I want to believe that you'll stand up for us, that you'll set those boundaries. But I can't go through this again. I can't spend the rest of our marriage wondering when the next family gathering will make. You question whether you chose the right person. You won't have to, I promise. You promised to love and honor me 3 years ago, but you've spent this entire cruise allowing your family to dishonor me while you stayed silent. David flinched as if I'd slapped him. You're right, and I'm sorry, but I'm asking for another chance to get this right. I picked up the vow renewal papers again, reading through the ceremony details David had planned. It was thoughtful and romantic, exactly the kind of gesture that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. But it was also symbolic of a larger problem. David making grand gestures while avoiding the difficult daily work of protecting our relationship. If we do this, I said slowly, if we renew our vows, it has to mean something. It has to represent real change, not just good intentions. It will. I'll make sure it will. Then have that conversation with your family first. Set those boundaries. Show me that you're prepared to choose our marriage over their comfort. If you can do that, then we can talk about vow renewal. David nodded, determination replacing the uncertainty that had plagued him for days. Okay, I'll talk to them tonight. All of them. Together. No more private conversations where they can manipulate the message or claim they were misunderstood. Together, I understand. As David left my cabin to prepare for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult conversation of his life, I sat holding the vow renewal papers and wondering if our marriage was strong enough to survive the test. It was about to face. I spent the next 2 hours in my cabin, alternating between pacing the small space and sitting frozen on the bed, my mind racing with possibilities of how David's conversation with his family might unfold. Every few minutes I checked the time, wondering if he'd found the courage to confront them yet, or if he was still rehearsing what he wanted to say. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Talking to them now in Mom and Dad's suite. Wish me luck. I typed back, good luck, and then immediately deleted it, typing instead, I believe in you. Then I deleted that too, finally settling on, I'm here when you're ready to talk. The ship's dinner service was in full swing, and I could hear the distant sounds of laughter and conversation from the main dining rooms. I'd missed dinner entirely, too nervous to eat, and now my stomach was growling in protest. I ordered room service, more for something to do than because I was actually hungry. 20 minutes later, a cheerful crew member delivered a Caesar salad and bread rolls to my door. I picked at the food while staring out my small porthole at the darkening ocean, trying not to imagine the worst-case scenarios. What if David's family convinced him that I was the problem? What if they threatened to cut him off financially or emotionally if he didn't leave me? What if years of family pressure finally overwhelmed his resolve? My phone rang at 9:15, making me jump. David's name appeared on the screen. How did it go? I answered immediately. It's still going. His voice sounded strained, exhausted. Can I come to your room? I need a break, and I want to tell you what's happened so far. Of course. 5 minutes later, David knocked softly on my door. When I opened it, he looked like he'd aged years in the past few hours. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there were stress lines around his eyes I'd never noticed before. Come in, I said, stepping aside. David slumped into the room's single chair, running his hands through his hair. This is harder than I thought it would be. Tell me what happened. I asked them all to meet in Mom and Dad's suite, told them we needed to have a family discussion about boundaries and respect. David's voice was hoarse, like he'd been talking for hours. Mom immediately got defensive, said she didn't understand why we needed a formal meeting, that families should be able to speak freely with each other. And what did you say? I told her that speaking freely doesn't include constantly undermining my marriage or making my wife feel unwelcome. David looked up at me, and I saw a glimmer of the strength I'd been hoping to find. I was specific, Jess. I brought up the dinner conversation about Stephanie, the comments about your swimming, the questions about your motivations, all of it. How did they react? Caroline accused me of keeping score, said that family members should be able to express concerns without having their words twisted. Dad stayed mostly quiet, but I could tell he was uncomfortable with the whole thing. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing David. And your mother? Mom tried to turn it around on me. Said that if I was secure in my marriage, comments from family shouldn't bother me so much, that my defensiveness proved their concerns were valid. The same thing she said during ziplining. Exactly. But this time I was ready for it. David's voice grew stronger. I told her that my defensiveness wasn't proof of insecurity in my marriage. It was proof that I won't tolerate disrespect toward my wife, regardless of who it comes from. I felt a spark of hope. What did she say to that? She started crying, told me she felt like she was losing her son, that I'd changed completely since the wedding, that she didn't recognize me anymore. My heart sank. Patricia's tears were a weapon. She'd wielded effectively for decades, and I'd seen David crumble under them before. But here's the thing, Jess. This time, instead of rushing to comfort her, I just sat there. And I realized that her tears weren't about missing me or worrying about my happiness. They were about losing control. How do you mean? David leaned forward, his eyes focused and clear. She's been the primary woman in my life for 34 years. She's used to being the one I turn to for advice, the one whose approval matters most, the one who gets to weigh in on every major decision. When I married you, I shifted that loyalty, and she's been fighting to get it back ever since. And Caroline? Caroline follows Mom's lead in everything. If Mom doesn't like you, Caroline doesn't like you. If Mom thinks you're wrong for me, Caroline agrees. She's never formed her own opinion about our relationship because she's too busy parroting whatever Mom says. I absorbed this, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. So what happens now? I told them that things have to change. That the comments about you, the comparisons to Stephanie, the subtle undermining, all of it has to stop immediately. And if it doesn't? David was quiet for a moment, and I could see him gathering courage for what he was about to say. I told them that if they can't respect my wife, then they can't have a relationship with me. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt my breath catch. This was what I'd been hoping for, what I'd needed to hear, but I also understood the magnitude of what David was risking. David, that's a huge step. Are you sure you're ready for the consequences? I'm sure I'm ready to stop letting them hurt you. I'm sure I'm ready to stop pretending that their behavior is acceptable just because they're family. How did they react when you said that? Mom got hysterical. Started talking about how you'd turned me against my own family, how I was choosing a stranger over the people who raised me. David's jaw tightened. That's when I really lost it. What did you do? I told her that you're not a stranger. You're my wife. You're the person I chose to build a life with, the person I want to grow old with, the person whose happiness matters more to me than anyone else's comfort. David's voice was steady, sure. I told her that if she can't accept that, then she's choosing to exclude herself from our lives. I felt tears starting to form, not from sadness but from relief. This was the husband I'd needed him to be, the partner who would stand up for our marriage even when it cost him something. What did your dad say? Dad surprised me. He told Mom that she was out of line, that her behavior toward you has been inappropriate for years. He said he's been watching it happen and should have spoken up sooner. Really? Really, I think Dad sees things more clearly than I gave him credit for. He apologized to me for not intervening before now. And Caroline? David's expression darkened slightly. Caroline doubled down, said that Mom was right, that you'd isolated me from my family, that I was making a mistake I'd regret for the rest of my life. That must have been hard to hear. It was, but it also clarified things for me. Caroline isn't interested in having a relationship with both of us. She wants the version of me that existed before you, and that person doesn't exist anymore. We sat in silence for a few minutes, processing the enormity of what had transpired. Finally, I spoke. What happens now? Are you going back to finish the conversation? I am. But first I wanted to ask you something. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. This isn't an engagement ring. It's something else. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small engraving on the inside. I took it carefully, reading the inscription. Chosen daily. I had this made before the cruise, David explained. I was going to give it to you during the vow renewal ceremony as a symbol of my ongoing commitment to you. But I realize now that the ceremony itself isn't what matters. It's the choice to honor you and our marriage every single day, especially when it's difficult. I slipped the ring onto my right hand, feeling the weight of its promise. It's beautiful. Jess, I know I've failed you these past few days. I know I should have stood up for you sooner, should have set boundaries with my family years ago, but I'm asking for another chance to be the husband you deserve. You've already started being that husband tonight. Does that mean you'll consider renewing our vows with me? I looked at this man who had just risked his family relationships to defend our marriage, who had faced down years of manipulation and pressure to choose me, and I felt the love I'd been protecting behind walls of hurt start to flow freely again. Yes, I said simply. I'll renew our vows with you. David's face lit up with relief and joy. He moved from the chair to sit beside me on the bed, taking my hands in his. Thank you for giving me another chance, for believing in us. even when I didn't. So what's the plan? When do we have this ceremony? Tomorrow evening, after we dock in Grand Cayman. The ship's chaplain can perform the ceremony in the chapel at sunset. It'll be just us, the way it should have been all along. What about your family? David's expression grew serious again. What about them? Are you going to tell them about the vow renewal? Eventually, but not until after we've had our moment. This isn't about them, and I'm not going to let them overshadow it or make it about their feelings. I squeezed his hands. You should go finish your conversation with them. Set whatever final boundaries you need to set. Are you sure? I could stay here with you. I'm sure. They need to understand that this isn't negotiable, that respecting me isn't optional if they want to maintain a relationship with you. David stood, looking more determined than I'd seen him in years. You're right. And Jess? Whatever happens in that room, whatever they say or threaten or promise, it doesn't change anything between us. You're my priority now. After David left, I sat holding the ring he'd given me, turning it so the inscription caught the light. Chosen daily. It was a simple phrase, but it captured everything that had been missing from our marriage lately. The daily choice to prioritize each other, to defend each other, to build something together that was stronger than outside pressure. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Still thinking about you. Hope everything is okay. I typed back, it's getting better. I'll call you tomorrow and tell you everything. Good. Love you, girl. You're stronger than you know. I smiled, feeling stronger than I had in days. Whatever happened with David's family, whatever consequences came from his decision to set boundaries, we would face them together. And that made all the difference. An hour later, David texted, "Conversation is over. Coming to your room to tell you everything." When he arrived this time, he looked exhausted but peaceful, like someone who had finally put down a heavy burden they'd been carrying for years. How did it end? I asked, as he settled into the chair across from me. With me making it very clear that if they want to be part of our lives going forward, they need to treat you with respect. Not tolerance, not politeness, but genuine respect. And their response? Dad agreed immediately, said he was ashamed it had taken me this long to say it, and that he'd make sure Mom understood the new boundaries. And your mother? David sighed heavily. Mom is furious. She accused me of choosing you over family, said she didn't understand how I could prioritize a marriage over the people who raised me. That must have been painful. It was. But I told her that I wasn't choosing you over family. I was choosing to create a family with you, and that family takes priority over all others. What did Caroline say? Caroline said she needed time to think about whether she could accept the new rules. Which is fine. She can take all the time she needs. I reached for David's hand. Are you okay with how it ended? I'm okay with finally being honest about what I expect from them. I'm okay with putting our marriage first, even if it means some uncomfortable family dynamics for a while. It might be more than a while. I know, and that's a choice I'm prepared to live with. David brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. Because the alternative is losing you. And that's not acceptable. We talked for another hour about the vow renewal ceremony, about what we wanted to say to each other, about how we wanted to structure our relationship with his family going forward. For the first time since we'd boarded the ship, I felt like we were truly partners again, united in our commitment to protecting what we'd built together. I should probably go back to my own cabin, David said eventually. Let you get some rest before tomorrow. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my boldness. Would you like to stay here tonight? I know it's a small space, but I think I'd sleep better with you here. David's face softened. Are you sure? I'm sure. We have a lot of rebuilding to do, but I think we've taken the first steps tonight. As we settled into the narrow bed together, David wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I felt safe in a way I hadn't for days. Tomorrow we would renew our vows and recommit to choosing each other daily. Tonight, we would simply hold each other and begin the process of healing. Jess? David's voice was sleepy, muffled against my hair. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for finally fighting for us. Always, he whispered. From now on, always. As the ship rocked gently through the Caribbean night, carrying us toward Grand Cayman and our second chance at forever, I fell asleep wearing the ring that promised we would choose each other every day, no matter who or what tried to come between us. The next morning, I woke up in David's arms for the first time since our anniversary cruise had begun. And for a moment, I allowed myself to forget about everything that had happened. The gentle rocking of the ship, the warmth of his body against mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing. It all felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. But reality crept in quickly as I remembered the confrontation with his family, the boundaries that had been set, and the vow renewal ceremony planned for that evening. Today would be a test of whether David's newfound resolve would hold up under pressure, especially if his family decided to make one last attempt to change his mind. David stirred beside me, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw me watching him, he smiled that sleepy smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. "Good morning." "Mrs. Miller," he said softly. "Good morning. How are you feeling about everything?" David stretched, his arm tightening around me. "Nervous about today, but certain about us. That's a good combination, I think." "What's the plan for Grand Cayman?" "Well, Mom and Dad had booked a family snorkeling excursion, but I told them last night that we'd be doing our own thing today. Mom didn't take that well." I propped myself up on my elbow to look at him better. "What did she say?" "She accused me of being deliberately hurtful, said that I was punishing the whole family because I was angry with her." David's jaw tightened slightly. "I told her that spending time together as a family isn't a right, it's a privilege that has to be earned through mutual respect." That must have been hard to say. It was liberating, actually. I've spent so many years walking on eggshells around her feelings, trying to keep everyone happy, that I forgot I had the right to set expectations for how I want to be treated. We lay in comfortable silence for a few more minutes before David's phone buzzed with a text message. He reached for it reluctantly, and I saw his expression change as he read. "What is it?" "Caroline. She wants to meet with me privately before we dock. Says she has something important to discuss." I felt my stomach tighten. "Do you think she's going to try to talk you out of the boundaries you set?" "Probably, but it doesn't matter what she says. My mind is made up." "Are you going to meet with her?" David considered this, rolling onto his back and staring at the ceiling. "I think I should. If she's ready to apologize and commit to treating you respectfully, then we should hear her out. If she's planning another manipulation attempt, then it's better to shut it down now rather than let it fester. Do you want me to come with you?" "No, this is something I need to handle alone, but I'll tell you everything afterward." An hour later, David left to meet Caroline while I got ready for our day in Grand Cayman. I'd packed a sundress I'd been saving for a special occasion, a flowing blue fabric that made me feel confident and beautiful. If we were going to renew our vows that evening, I wanted to spend the day feeling like the woman David had chosen to marry, not the unwelcome intruder his family saw me as. I was applying sunscreen when David returned, looking frustrated and tired. "How did it go?" I asked, though his expression already told me most of what I needed to know. "About as well as expected." Caroline started by apologizing for her behavior, saying she'd been reflecting all night and realized she'd been unfair to you. But then she launched into this whole speech about how families sometimes say things they don't mean when emotions are running high, and how she hoped I wouldn't let a few misunderstandings destroy years of close relationships. I set down the sunscreen bottle, giving David my full attention. "Misunderstandings?" That's what she called them. 3 years of deliberate slights and cutting remarks, and she wants to dismiss them as misunderstandings. David shook his head in disgust. She actually suggested that maybe you were too sensitive, that you'd misinterpreted innocent comments as attacks. Did you correct her? I told her that there was nothing innocent about questioning your motivations for marrying me. Nothing accidental about constantly comparing you to Stephanie, and nothing misunderstood about making you feel unwelcome at family gatherings. How did she respond to that? David sat heavily in the room's small chair. She got defensive, said that asking questions and expressing concerns is what families do. Then she played her final card. Which was? She told me that if I cut them off, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. That family is forever, but marriages can end. And where would I be then without the people who truly know me? I felt anger flare in my chest, not just at Caroline's words, but at the calculated cruelty behind them. She basically threatened that our marriage would fail. She implied that their love was unconditional, while yours came with strings attached. Said that family members can fight and make up, but wives can take half your assets and disappear. David, I'm so sorry she said that to you. Don't be sorry, be angry, because I'm furious that my own sister would try to undermine my marriage by suggesting it's temporary, while her toxic behavior is something I should accept permanently. I moved to sit on the edge of the bed, facing him. What did you tell her? I told her that she was wrong about everything, that your love isn't conditional, it's earned through daily kindness and respect, that our marriage isn't temporary, it's the foundation I'm building my life on, and that if she can't see the difference between healthy family dynamics and manipulation, then she's not someone I want advising me on relationships. Was that the end of it? Not quite. She tried one more approach, the guilt trip. Started talking about how much our parents have sacrificed for me over the years. How heartbroken Mom would be if I chose you over family. How Dad's health couldn't handle the stress of a family feud. I winced. Patricia had taught her daughter well in the art of emotional manipulation. But here's the thing, Jess. As she was talking, I kept thinking about last night, about how you looked when I finally stood up for you. The relief in your eyes, the way your whole body relaxed when you realized I was finally choosing us over their comfort. David reached for my hands, and I realized that Caroline was asking me to prioritize their feelings over yours again, just like I've been doing for 3 years. So what did you say? I told her that the conversation was over, that I'd set clear boundaries, and either she could respect them or she couldn't. But I wasn't going to keep debating whether my wife deserves basic courtesy from my family. I squeezed his hands, feeling proud of this man who was learning to value our marriage over family politics. I know that wasn't easy. It was easier than I thought it would be. I think I've been afraid of their disapproval for so long that I forgot how good it feels to stand up for what's right. We spent the morning exploring Georgetown together, wandering through local shops and along 7 Mile Beach. For the first time since we'd boarded the ship, we felt like a couple on vacation instead of 2 people navigating a minefield of family drama. David bought me a small conch shell necklace from a local artisan, and I picked out a leather bracelet for him. Small tokens that felt significant after everything we'd been through. As we walked along the beach, David told me more about the vow renewal ceremony he'd planned. He'd arranged for the ship's chaplain to meet us in the onboard chapel at 6 o'clock, just as the sun was setting over the Caribbean. There would be fresh flowers, music, and a photographer to capture the moment. I know it's not as elaborate as our original wedding, David said as we sat on the sand, watching waves roll onto the shore. It's perfect, I replied. And I meant it. Our original wedding had been beautiful but complicated, with guest lists to manage and family politics to navigate. This ceremony would be just about us, about the promises we were making to each other, without outside pressure or expectations. Around 2 o'clock, as we were sharing a late lunch at a beachside restaurant, David's phone rang. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. "You don't have to answer it," I said quietly. "I should. Better to deal with whatever this is now rather than let it build up." David answered on the fourth ring. "Hi, Mom." Even sitting across from him, I could hear Patricia's voice through the phone, high-pitched and agitated. David's expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. "Mom, slow down. What exactly are you saying?" More rapid talking from Patricia's end, punctuated by what sounded like crying. "No, Mom. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm being an adult who expects his family to treat his wife with respect." A longer stretch of Patricia talking, during which David closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "That's not what this is about. And you know it. This isn't about choosing Jessica over family. This is about refusing to tolerate behavior that damages my marriage." I watched David's face cycle through frustration, hurt, and finally determination, as his mother continued her emotional appeal. "Mom, I love you, but I'm not going to keep having this conversation. Either you can accept that Jessica is my wife and treat her accordingly, or you can't. But I'm not going to negotiate about basic respect anymore." Patricia's voice rose to a volume I could clearly hear, though I couldn't make out specific words. Whatever she was saying, it was having an effect on David, who looked pained but resolute. "That's your choice, Mom. I hope you'll reconsider. But if you can't, then we'll have to take a break from each other until you can." More crying from Patricia, and then the line went quiet. "She hung up," David said, staring at his phone. "What did she say?" David set his phone on the table and looked out at the ocean for a long moment before answering. "She said that if I don't apologize to her and Caroline for last night, and if I don't convince you to apologize for causing division in the family, then she's done with both of us." "She wants me to apologize?" "For existing, apparently. For marrying her son. For not being Stephanie. For having the audacity to expect basic courtesy from his family." I felt a familiar mix of hurt and anger, but underneath it was something new, a strange sense of relief. "So she's given us an ultimatum." "She has, and I've given her my answer." "Are you okay with this? With the possibility that you might not speak to your mother for a while?" David was quiet for several minutes, watching seagulls dive for fish in the clear water. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sad about it. I'm angry about it. But I'm not changing my mind about it." He turned to look at me directly. "Jess, I spent 34 years trying to be the son my mother wanted, trying to make choices that would keep her happy. And you know what I learned? It's never enough. There's always another expectation, another way I'm disappointing her, another person I should prioritize over my own happiness." David. "I'm done living my life according to her script. I'm done pretending that her love is worth sacrificing yours for. I'm done being afraid that if I don't give her what she wants, she'll withdraw her approval." I reached across the table to take his hand. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your relationship with your mother. You're not the reason. Her inability to accept that I'm an adult with my own family is the reason. Her refusal to treat my wife with basic respect is the reason. Her demand that I choose between her happiness and my marriage is the reason. But still. Jess, listen to me. If my mother truly loved me, she would want me to be happy. She would want my marriage to succeed. She would treat the woman I chose to spend my life with as someone worthy of kindness and inclusion." David's voice was steady, certain. "The fact that she doesn't do any of those things tells me everything I need to know about what she actually wants from me." We finished lunch in contemplative silence, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just happened. David had essentially been forced to choose between his wife and his mother, and he'd chosen me. It should have felt like a victory, but instead it felt like a sad necessity, a boundary that should never have needed to be drawn. As we walked back toward the ship, David's phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Son, I'm sorry about your mother's call. She's upset and not thinking clearly. Give her time to cool down, and hopefully she'll come to her senses. Proud of you for standing up for your marriage. David showed me the message, and I felt grateful that at least one member of his family understood what was really happening. Dad gets it, David said. That gives me hope that this rift with Mom won't be permanent. And if it is permanent, then I'll grieve that loss, but I won't regret the choice that caused it. Back on the ship, we spent the afternoon preparing for our vow renewal ceremony. David went to confirm details with the chaplain while I took a long bath and did my hair and makeup. I'd brought a white dress for this moment, not quite a wedding gown, but something special enough to mark the occasion. As I got ready, I thought about the difference between this ceremony and our original wedding 3 years ago. Then, I'd been focused on making everyone else happy, on ensuring that our families were comfortable and included, on managing personalities and expectations. Tonight, the only people I needed to please were David and myself. There was a knock on my cabin door at 5:30. I opened it to find David standing in the hallway wearing a navy blue suit I'd never seen before, holding a small bouquet of white roses. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes soft with emotion. "You clean up pretty well yourself. Is that a new suit?" "I bought it specifically for tonight. Seemed like the kind of occasion that deserved new clothes." David offered me his arm, and we walked together toward the ship's chapel. The hallways were quiet, most passengers either at dinner or preparing for evening entertainment, and it felt like we were the only two people in the world. The chapel was small but elegant, with wooden pews and stained glass windows that caught the golden light of the setting sun. The chaplain, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted us warmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, are you ready to renew your commitment to each other?" "We are," David and I said simultaneously, then looked at each other and smiled. The ceremony was simple and perfect. We exchanged the vows we'd written separately, promising to choose each other daily, to protect our marriage from outside pressures, and to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. When David slipped a new wedding band onto my finger to accompany the chosen daily ring, I felt like we were truly getting married for the first time, free from family expectations and external pressures. By the power vested in me by this vessel and the authority of the sea, I now pronounce you husband and wife, renewed in love and commitment, the chaplain said. You may kiss your bride again. David's kiss was tender and full of promise, and when we broke apart, both of us had tears in our eyes. "How does it feel to be married to me for the second time?" David asked as we posed for photos with the setting sun streaming through the chapel windows. "Like the first time, but better. Like we actually know what we're promising each other now." After the ceremony, we had dinner at the ship's most elegant restaurant, just the two of us, celebrating our renewed commitment. David had arranged for champagne and chocolate-covered strawberries, and we talked about our hopes for the future, our dreams for the next phase of our marriage, and our plans for protecting what we'd rebuilt. "So, what happens when we get home?" I asked as we shared dessert. "How do we handle family gatherings and holidays?" "We create our own traditions," David replied. "We host Thanksgiving at our house, and anyone who wants to join us is welcome as long as they treat both of us with respect. We spend Christmas morning together, just us, and if other people want to see us, they can work around our schedule." "And your mother?" David was quiet for a moment, swirling champagne in his glass. "I'm hoping she'll come around. I'm hoping that when she realizes I'm serious about these boundaries, she'll decide that having a relationship with us is more important than being right about everything. And if she doesn't? Then we'll build a beautiful life without her constant criticism and manipulation. It won't be the family dynamic I grew up with, but it'll be healthier than what we've been tolerating." Later that evening, as we stood on our balcony watching the stars reflect on the calm Caribbean waters, David pulled me close and spoke softly in my ear. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for making me see that choosing you isn't betraying my family. It's honoring the commitment I made to you. Thank you for finally making that choice, for showing me that our marriage matters more to you than keeping everyone else comfortable. Always, David said, echoing the promise he'd made the night before. From now on, always. We spent our last full day at sea lounging by the pool, reading books, and enjoying the peaceful quiet of a ship where we no longer felt like we were walking on eggshells. David's family kept their distance, whether by choice or by his request. I didn't know and didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I belonged on this ship, in this family vacation, in this life I'd built with the man I loved. That afternoon, while David was at the gym, I received an unexpected visitor. Robert knocked on our cabin door, looking nervous but determined. "Jessica, do you have a few minutes to talk?" I invited him in, curious about what David's father wanted to discuss. "I owe you an apology," Robert said without preamble. "I should have spoken up years ago about Patricia's behavior toward you. I should have defended you, supported you, made it clear that you were welcome in our family. Robert, you don't need to." "Yes, I do. I've watched my wife systematically undermine your marriage for 3 years, and I stayed silent because it was easier than confronting her. That was cowardly and wrong." I was surprised by his directness, by the genuine remorse in his voice. "I also want you to know that I think David made the right choice. In standing up to Patricia, in setting boundaries, in choosing your marriage over her comfort. It took courage, and I'm proud of him for finally finding it." "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot coming from you." Patricia may not come around for a while. She's not used to people saying no to her, and she's certainly not used to David prioritizing anyone over her wishes. But I hope you'll give her time to adjust to the new reality. Of course, I don't want David to lose his relationship with his mother. I just want her to treat our marriage with respect. That's all any of us should ask for, Robert agreed. And Jessica? For what it's worth, I think my son chose well. You're good for him in ways Patricia refuses to see. After Robert left, I sat thinking about the conversation and what it meant for our future family dynamics. Having David's father as an ally would make holiday gatherings less stressful, assuming we ever had them again. It also gave me hope that perhaps eventually Patricia might follow her husband's lead and find a way to accept me as part of the family. That evening, our last night on the ship, David and I had dinner alone again, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past 5 days. We'd boarded as a couple celebrating an anniversary, but we were leaving as partners who'd fought for their marriage and won. "I have something for you," David said as we finished our meal. He handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a photo album containing pictures from our vow renewal ceremony, along with candid shots the photographer had taken of us throughout the day. On the first page, David had written, "To Jessica, thank you for teaching me that real love requires courage. Here's to choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives. David, this is beautiful. I wanted you to have something to remember this day by. Not just the ceremony, but everything that led up to it. The hard conversations, the difficult choices, the moment we decided to fight for us instead of giving up." I flipped through the photos, seeing the joy and relief on both our faces, the way we looked at each other like we were falling in love all over again. "You know what I love most about these pictures?" I said. "What?" "We look free, like we're finally the couple we were meant to be, without anyone else's expectations weighing us down." David smiled and reached for my hand, running his thumb over the new wedding band he'd placed there the night before. "That's exactly what we are, and that's exactly what we're going to stay." The next morning, as we packed our bags and prepared to disembark in Miami, I felt different than I had 5 days earlier. I felt stronger, more secure in my marriage, more confident in my place in David's life. We'd weathered a storm that could have destroyed us, and instead we'd emerged more committed than ever. As we walked off the ship together, David carrying both our bags despite my protests, I thought about what we were returning to. There would be difficult conversations ahead, family relationships to navigate, boundaries to maintain. Patricia might never accept me, Caroline might continue to resent the new dynamics, and holidays might be complicated for years to come. But none of that mattered as much as it once had, because I now knew without question that David was on my side. He'd proven that when it mattered most, when everything was on the line, he would choose our marriage over anyone else's comfort. He'd learned to value my happiness over his family's approval, and that changed everything. 3 months later, we received a carefully worded email from Patricia requesting a meeting to discuss the possibility of moving forward as a family. It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was an acknowledgement that the status quo had to change. If she wanted a relationship with her son. We met at a neutral restaurant, where Patricia made an effort to ask about my work, to include me in conversations, to treat me like someone whose opinions mattered. It was stilted and clearly uncomfortable. For her, but it was progress. Caroline took longer to come around, but eventually she too reached out, admitting that she'd been wrong to question my place in David's life and asking if we could start over. The relationships would never be easy or natural, but they became workable. More importantly, David never wavered in his commitment to protecting our marriage. When old patterns tried to reassert themselves, he shut them down immediately. When family gatherings became tense, he was quick to remove us from the situation rather than expect me to tolerate disrespect. 6 months after the cruise, David surprised me with a framed photo from our vow renewal ceremony. In it, we're standing at the altar of the ship's chapel, golden sunset light streaming through the windows, looking at each other with absolute certainty and joy. "I want to remember this moment," he said as he hung it in our bedroom. "I want to remember what it feels like to choose you without reservation, so that if I ever start to waver again, I can look at this picture and remember who we are when we're at our best." I stood beside him, looking at the photo of two people who'd fought for their love and won, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. We had learned that marriage isn't just about love, it's about courage. About the daily choice to protect and prioritize your partnership above all other relationships. And we had finally learned to choose each other, every single day, no matter what. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.